Okay, a couple more people coming in from the waiting room. Hello, everyone. And one moment here. Okay. So welcome to the Meaningful Assessment of Classroom Practices to Close the Equity Gap session. My name is Megan. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Before I introduce our presenters, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items with you. Please note that we are in a Zoom meeting. You're going to have both video and audio capabilities. We ask that you please keep yourself muted. During the presentation, please utilize the chat function. We will have opportunity for question and answers. And let me go ahead and pass it off to our presenters. Dawn, did you want to take over from here?
And okay, looking for the PowerPoint up now, please.
Why don't you start, Mary? I'll cue the PowerPoint.
Okay. So welcome. This is the De Anza College, and we call ourselves the Student Learning Outcome Core Team. And let me introduce myself first. I'm Mary Pape, and I am the Student Learning Outcome Coordinator for the instruction. And next, Veronica.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Veronica Acevedo Avila, and I am an English faculty member at the college. I'm also the SSLO coordinator working with the non-instructional side of the college. And I'm also co-coordinator for the Latinx at Empowerment at De Anza program. And I'll hand it over to May.
Hi, everyone. My name's May Lee. I'm a faculty in ethnic studies. I'm also the vice chair of curriculum. Good to see you all here. I'll pass it to Dawn.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here at this session with us today. My name is Dawn. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm the faculty director of professional development at De Anza College. And I know some of you have started introducing yourself in chat. I encourage you all to do that so that we can all connect with one another. So thank you and welcome. Who am I going to go to next? Let's see. Karen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Oops, unmute myself. Okay. Thank you for being here and joining us. My name is Karen Chow. I am an English and Women's Studies and Asian American Studies faculty at De Anza College. I'm also currently the Academic Senate President. And so in that role, I'm also serving on our SLO core team and really thrilled to be with my colleagues presenting to you today. Thanks.
And today we are missing our institutional research person, Mallory Newell. She is on a well-deserved professional development leave. And standing in for her today is Lisa Lee. Lisa, how about if you introduce yourself, please? I think she's in here. I saw her name pop up. Maybe she is not in yet. Okay, thank you. So we'll go on with our presentation then, please.
Mary, you're muted.
Muted? Thank you.
Yeah.
Our objective and problem statement is our first thing. How do we use meaningful assessments of our classroom practices to address success rates to increase successful outcomes for Black, African American, Latinx, and Filipinx groups? Too few students of color, specifically Black, African American, Latinx, and Filipinx students, are successfully completing their courses. At De Anza College for 2018-19, the success rates for these student groups was 69%, compared to 83% for white and other Asian students. These long-standing equity gaps demand a close examination of how faculty can reevaluate their practices so all students learn and succeed. Factors to consider when we're looking at student success and equity gaps. First of all, academic skills that students bring with them to the classroom. And I can't help but breaking here to mention a takeaway I had from our keynote this morning. And it goes like this: we must be ready for our students They do not have to be ready for us. And along those lines, we know that nationwide in the state of California, in the Bay Area, wherever you look, school quality and the quality of preparation for students. And we know that students in targeted group it differs widely. And in targeted groups, we find that disproportionately attend our students from targeted groups disproportionately attend those poor quality schools that get fewer resources. So what do we do in those situations? The dynamics of engagement that happen in the classroom. What is the student's confidence level of doing well in the work? What is the student's ability of feeling like they belong? How do they get a chance to meet and connect with fellow students in the classroom? Does the curriculum speak to them? What is the instructor's teaching manner? All those things make a difference to the engagement of the student in the classroom. And then we know that there are outside stressors that distract students from staying focused on the classwork and finishing the class. We know that it affects a student if they need to worry about where they're going to sleep tonight, where their next meal is coming from. Are they being pulled by family responsibilities? Do they have physical and mental health issues to deal with that interrupt them from staying focused? And next, I would like to introduce Veronica, and she is going to lead us all through an activity on the Jamboard.
Hi, everyone. So for those of you who have not used Jamboard in your class, it's actually a fun little tool that I enjoy using and my students enjoy using. So I just want to show you the Jamboard first and foremost, and then also add that this workshop is very interactive and we do want active engagement. So a lot of what you'll be doing is really part of this workshop. So if Dawn can go ahead and open up the Jamboard, and Dawn, if you can drop the link in the chat. So the link I have for everyone here is it allows you to edit. So just be careful. So if I could ask you to pause and hear me out in terms of how to use the Jamboard. But you are all our editors, so you have the access and the ability to go ahead and delete and add. So let's see, let's get the Jamboard up on the screen. You'll find that, well, Dawn's getting the Jamboard up on the screen, that there are tools on the side of the Jamboard. And she just dropped the link in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
Hold on
Dawn.
1 second.
Okay.
Internet is a little bit slow right now. Okay.
So while Dawn's getting the Jamboard up, you have access to the link, so you can go ahead and open up your link. But before you get started, we do have 6 boards we'd like to go over with you. So as you can see in the Jamboard, you have an icon that reflects a little pen. That's a little glitchy to use. You can use it, but it's not the best. Then below that, you have an eraser, and below that, you have a pointer, which you won't be using. Below that, you'll have a sticky note, and the sticky note does have a limited word count, so you can write something brief there, and that's probably what you'll be using. You'll notice when you start using, oh, someone is already using the sticky note. When you start using the sticky note, you can modify it, and you can also inadvertently cover someone else's sticky note. So just be careful about that. And I won't go over the rest of the icons. There is a text icon that you can use too. The sticky note and the text icon are the ones that you want to use. And then you could see if someone else is already doing, you can go ahead. So our questions are these questions. Number 1, how do you address the different academic skills that students bring to your class? How do you teach in a way that invites active interest and participation by all students in the class? how do you structure the class so that students with different outside stressors are able to participate on equal footing? So as you can see, we have some ideas, but we also want to hear your ideas. So if you can just go ahead, open up the link if you haven't done already, go to the sticky note or the text box. You can use that pin, but the pin is a little glitchy, and just write free write responses to our 3 questions. I'll give you some time to do that.
So Veronica, while people are doing that, right, let's kind of talk about this at a metacognitive level so we can tie into some of the things that we already asked in our first question, right? So this is a very interactive strategy, right? And what's some, give us some insight on the strategy in terms of engaging students and how this might, impact them in terms of their learning.
Well, as you can see, Mary brought up things that issues, situations that students, especially when we're talking about students of color, especially when talking about lower income students, which are a large part of our community college populations, that they bring to the classroom, right? So then we have to think of creative ways of engaging our students who are not reaching these equity gaps. And so we do this as a group. We do this exercise in which we reach out to you because we find that there are common denominators, both in ways of reaching out to these students and working with them, and also in addressing these issues. So I can see the sticky notes, I'm just gonna read them. Some people try to diversify learning activities. Some people work with a survey of questions at the beginning of the semester. I'm guessing it means to get to know who their students are. Some people give students at least a week to complete the subject, to submit the assignment, so some flexibility, including quizzes and exams. Some topics on perception, discrimination, single story. So some people try to see their students' cultures. Some people provide lots of backgrounds for new content and options to access that information. Some people give students an introductory discussion board to introduce themselves to other students in the course. Some people start to see one that says start simple so students can feel confident. So accessing their confidence by introducing, the heavier concepts later, I'm guessing. Some people student-centered, have a student-centered approach, lots of working with partners, opportunities. So as we can see, there's a diversity of, there are diverse ways to reach out to students to get them engaged. Some people use the polling, I'm guessing on Zoom or others, to question students about participation or participating during student virtual sessions. And I'm wondering if anyone wants to elaborate on any of the things that they said, or perhaps something you haven't written, and you can just go ahead and unmute and share with us something that's really been effective in ways that you bring in students, and the particular emphasis are students that are not achieving the gap, ways to bring them into the classroom.
If you'd like, you can raise your hand, or you can also put in some thoughts in chat as well. I can lift those up too.
So you can see we're seeing some common denominators in terms of accessing their, the emotional skills, giving them confidence, offering them that kind of emotional support, and also working with the classroom content, perhaps introducing it in a way that is a little bit more accessible, and then coming into difficult subject matter a little bit later. And skills such as reflective learning, providing resources, encourage reflection of learning weekly, providing resources for how we what we do translate to soft skills or hard skills in the workplace. So there's this transference of learning to make it more applicable from classroom intellectual thought to real life applicable learning. Oh, and helping students see how we're helping them build future goals. So making a concrete application of what we're learning in the classroom to how it's going to be used in the outside world. Great responses. One person said they grade in person via Zoom. They have several conferences with students. I know in my classroom, I'm finding, I don't know why, I don't know if other people agree with this, but I'm finding that my students are coming to office hours like they never have before. I don't know if that's a flexibility, but I'm also very flexible in meeting with them. So I have set office hours, but even outside of that time, they come and they meet with me. I feel like I'm getting more traffic, office hour traffic, which is a good thing. Remind students what the SLOs are and what they are achieving. So really looking at the student objectives. If anyone, again, wants to add or define or specify what they do, what they mean, or, you know, in regard to what they put on, please feel free, again, as Dawn said, either in the chat or say out loud. Yeah, the common denominator is this keyword flexibility. One person wrote, I do not penalize late work. They have 2 weeks to post in the discussion. After that, they have an opportunity to do makeup. We're finding that is quite common. This is anecdotal when I say this, but it seems like that's a common theme of flexibility, a common theme of allowing late work, especially now that we're in a global pandemic and there's a lot of stressors, outside stressors, that are definitely affecting, impacting our community college students.
Veronica, we actually have a hand.
Yeah,
Tamina,
all right.
I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Tamina. I teach at Moreno Valley College. Few things I've learned during the pandemic is not all students have Wi-Fi access. Not all students have, you know, the flexibility. Sometimes, you know, they may have to work no matter they've signed up for the class. If it's a synchronous class, not sometimes maybe after they signed up, they got a job and they absolutely need to work for hardship or whatever reason, you know, family obligations. So one thing that has worked for me is that join the Zoom session maybe 10 minutes before or stay there after the virtual session. Or when I joined before, simply just ask, how are they doing? Whether they need any help. And sometimes, you know, just by asking a simple question, students may open up, and that gives you an idea where the students are coming from. So whether they have any family issues, whether it's a multi-generational family environment where they're coming from. And so the survey questions helps me beforehand where they are. So if they can't attend the virtual session, the synchronous one, and if I'm recording and posting the session, will they have the opportunity to go and watch it? So empathy is so big in today's world, and we all have to realize that no matter how well designed the class is, we have to be flexible with our students. And so knowing our students, what they're going through is so important before even, you know, at the week one, I think that's the best thing that we can do with our students. And I totally agree with some of my peers here that have office hours other than, or just be open to meet the students beyond the office hour. That really helps. During fall session, that was my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent response. I just took notes on some of the things that I heard you say. And one of them is recognizing who our community college students are, right? They are the workers. A lot of them are essential workers, and the ability to be flexible. But it seems like the key theme I heard from you, and I'm hearing from others, is making this human connection, finding finding a way to teach with compassion, to teach with empathy, and making that human connection. And I think, well, we could do a whole workshop on that. And I think that what that does is that brings in trust to the relationship, that brings in a softness, and that brings in a willingness for them to learn. Certainly there's co-relational studies on empathy and compassion and the willingness to learn. I'm going to go ahead and continue, but thank you so much. And I just also wanted to tell our participants that what I'm going to do is gather all your wonderful thoughts and your comments and put them in a Word doc. And then for those who want that, just to help you in your teaching for the future, I'll go ahead and have that ready. Our team will have that ready.
All right, I'm going to go back to the slides now. All right. All right, so this is my part, right? So now that you've warmed up a little and you're thinking about how you've been engaging students, specifically those disproportionately impacted students, right? Let's think a little bit about how we define meaningful assessment, right? So when we talk about meaningful assessment, there are really two types that we're focusing on here, just for this conversation. There's lots of meaningful assessments out there, but we're just focusing on two specific ones, right? So the first one, right, is thinking about what kinds of skills do your students acquire during the class, and how do they exhibit those skills? And this relates to the SLOs, right? How do they exhibit those skills at the end of the class, right? Traditionally, we assess those outcomes by doing, right, a midterm, a final, a paper, right? The example here is at the end of the course, students will identify the critical points in American history as it relates to government and politics. This is actual, right, assessment outcome. And we're all familiar with this one. So the second one we're thinking about is, how do students themselves, right, perceive the curriculum and the classroom environment, and how do they feel within the classroom community when they learn the content, right? And it's blank by accident. We didn't mess up on the slide because we want you to think about this now. So let me recap this, right? So we want to think about meaningful assessment from the student's vantage point. So how do they perceive themselves in the curriculum and the classroom environment? And how do they feel in terms of the type of community you've created for them, the educational environment you've created for them, right? And how, when they're learning the content, right? So we want you to think a little bit about that. So some reflection questions, right, to think about as you are, pondering that is, first, what do students bring into the classroom? What are their life circumstances, right? In particular, when we think about disproportionately impacted communities like Latinx, Black, and Filipinx students, right? What are their contexts that they're bringing into the classroom? In relation to that, right, and we often forget about this, is how do they perceive your content, right? Content, the way we deliver it, right? We try and make it as neutral and engaging as, it's an offering to our students, but, as students are listening, as they're working through and engaging, right, your content, right? How do they perceive your content? Next, how do they feel about your course and also the content? And this is a specific different question because question 2 is asking about perception, right? Third is asking about feelings. And this question really enables us to consider, well, how does this emotionally, right, help them connect? How does the content, how are they emotionally connecting with the content, right? And then fourth, how do they actually learn, right? Just because we assign students a particular way to, do a project, a paper, right? Did they get what you intended them to get? Or, actually, how did they learn, the concept or the skill that you wanted them to learn? Because sometimes we know that, students don't learn the way that we plan for them to learn sometimes, right? So, all right. So we have another opportunity for a Jamboard here. right? You're like, okay, Dawn, I have lots of stuff that I want to add now. And now that I know how to do stickies, okay, so the link is right there. Let me switch over to that window. Veronica, anything to share with us about this question as I'm bringing up the window?
No, it's very similar to the exercise we've been doing. We're going to be doing this, back and forth, what we say, what you say, and then coming up with some more, critical meanings. So this question, what is an example of a meaningful outcome assessment, is directed to our participants. So if you can share participants, sticky notes seem to work best, but there's a text box as well. What's an example of a meaningful outcome assessment? As Dawn mentioned, how do students perceive the content? How do they feel about the content? And when we're talking about those kinds of meaningful assessments and not the more traditional assessments, what's an example of a meaningful assessment outcome for you, for your students, for your class, for your content? And I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute to ask about that.
Well, I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry, folks. I'm seeing in chat that the link goes to an older Jamboard. I'm going to give you the correct link now. All right, that should be the correct one. Hold on, is that the correct one? Yes, that should be the correct one.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry, Veronica.
Technical difficulties. That's what happens with our students. That's what happens with us. So thank you for understanding, everyone. So go ahead. What is an example of a meaningful assessment outcome? And as you're gathering your thoughts and sharing with us, if anyone wants to elaborate, if anyone just wants to share, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. We'll go ahead and have you share out loud if you'd like.
Yeah, and thank you, Katie, for pointing out in chat. It's exactly the same link that we put at first. If you want to click this arrow right up here, right at the top, you just advance to the next slide or the next board, and that's how you get to the second one. You can tell folks are deep in thought here. Can I actually do a little bit of impromptu here? Okay, so May, I'm going to actually invite you to share. May has this wonderful final project. Okay, and you can, as everyone's kind of marinating, thinking, I know, right? Because everyone is gathering their thoughts. Can you share a little bit about that final project that you do with your students?
Okay, not sure which, I'll pick one. How's that?
Well, you do great final projects.
Okay, so for one of my, I teach an Asian American history course, and for that course, the final project, I used to have formal papers that people would have to do, and as an instructor, it may not be so fun to read through those, and also as students leave the class, you don't know, like 6 months from after they've left the class or a year later what they remember from the class. And so for that particular class on Asian American history, I've turned the final assignment into making a children's storybook that they have to create using images and text. And it's a storybook that it's meant for very young children, in which they have to tell something, a story, a narrative that is tied to and informed by Asian American history. It can be about an event, could be about a phenomenon experienced by Asian Americans. It can be about a figure in history. And so students have to kind of integrate what they've learned in the course, kind of think thematically, conceptually, but also explain it in a very simple way for young children. So that I find, I think students enjoy it more. They say they enjoy it more. And then also the work becomes more public. So some students, they've created the work and we've actually posted it on our departmental website so that we kind of showcase students' work, but also kind of engage the public in what is Asian American history in a kind of more fun and engaging way. So that's one example.
Yeah, and can you elaborate on how you got to this assignment as it relates to this question of meaningful assessment outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to complete the assignment, students really have to find ways to engage or enter to the material. So it's a good way for me to see kind of what excited them, what they glommed onto. So it can kind of help me understand like were there particular themes that were striking to the students, and so it helps me think about like what is most I guess striking and impactful for the students in their process of learning, and I can tweak the class based on, okay, a lot of students ended up talking about this. Is there something that I did in the class that reinforced that or made that topic kind of more accessible or more compelling to them?
Yeah, thank you, May. And if we remember the questions that I posed earlier, right, they're questions around, okay, how are students connecting, right, with your content? What experiences are they bringing in, right? How do they feel about the content, right? And so a final project like this really gives you also the opportunity to gauge, right, all of these, I think, differently substantive questions. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna give everybody a little bit of quiet time to do their stickies now.
And boy, I'm just going to start reading some of these stickies because they have, as when we've done this before, just very insightful ideas that can be applied universally throughout all our classroom and classroom content. So one is assess what instructor college needs with what the student needs. Another says, can the student relate to the content? So really questioning how can you help that content be relatable? Am I using real world examples that my students can, I think,
Sorry, I just zoomed in a little
oh,
bit.
okay.
Let me zoom back out.
Am I using real world examples that my students can relate to? For example, I want to start a landscape business. Can the student understand the costs that relate to it? An opportunity for students not only to complete assessment, but to make mistakes and then go back and edit them for higher performance. Yes, I teach writing, and I'm always, writing to me, writing is revision, so I can understand that one. So giving them that opportunity to get better through practice, right? Definitely. And I want my students to not just learn the material, but learn life skills, such as groupthink and critical think. So having these transferable skills, definitely, especially in academia, right? We teach them, how to work with groups. We teach them how to think critically about the things, content, subjects, and then helping them make that application to real life. Students propose new government legislation, local, national, and articulate its potential impact. Well, thank you very much for whoever's doing that, because we need good legislation out there and a good grasp of government, given what we're going through right now. A presentation on class outcome, worded in student speak. Oh, nice. So you make it accessible to students in the language that you use. Yeah, oftentimes I know we teach in academia, an academic language, and it's foreign to students. It's very unfamiliar, especially to our new community college students are in this open access, sphere of learning, our community college system. So she gives an example, or he does, or they do. What did you learn about diverse cultures? Students connect more with the images and and gifts, so that they love using creativity. Oh, nice. So yes, the text can be seen in an image, right? The text can be seen, a message can be seen anywhere. It's not just in a written language. Template for the project where student uses data from their real life experience. So yeah, I'm finding a lot of common denominators really going into the culture of the student, very Paulo Freire-ish, right? Going into the culture of the student and working from there, as opposed to us, talking to them about content and expecting them to just grasp onto the more abstract. Using relatable opportunities as they are trending. Amanda Gorman poem, teaching rhetorical devices. Yes, definitely real life, what's happening now, and applying that to what you're doing. Doing primary research to find what people know, think of a term. Very nice. So giving students context and content and background information to help them learn. Maybe I should have students write a brief submission about which one or two lessons or concepts have had the biggest impact on them and how that helps them understand their physical environment. I teach physical geography and weather and climate. It can be a low stakes, not many points, although the previous breakout said I should not use points for anything. I'm going to say, and I would love my colleagues to chime in here, that you use whatever works for you. If points works for you, then use points. If points don't work for you, then don't use points. But I think I say that not flippantly. I say that sincerely because we also have to be comfortable with how we teach, right? And that's part of the authenticity and the meaningfulness of it is if there's an air of pretense on our part because we're doing what we think is right or what we see is right, it's not going to come across. That pretense is going to come across. So it has to be meaningful to you and also to your students. So I think there is this reciprocal part of the teaching that we have to be aware of. So in a sense, it's important to know who you are and what you bring into the classroom too, I think.
Yeah, and you know
John,
what?
did you want to?
I do. So,
Yeah.
and if we remember from our first board too, right? Many of you talked about how it's really important to help our students understand what's going on in terms of our teaching in the classroom. So just to add to what Veronica said, and someone put this right there, if you value it, use the points, and students value points, but also be very transparent about what does it mean, right? For you to use points and how are points assigned, and that transparency in teaching, right? Transparent teaching, which I know that Veronica and I have talked about, right? Is also very important when we think about not only disproportionately impacted students, but students in general.
And I love that comment. Thank you about the transparency. And I love that comment tying transparency to value. If it's important to you, then be honest about why it's important to you and share that with your students because they'll see it too. And it might not be that important to them or it might be off-putting, but then that's a conversation you and the students can have, right? Why is this important? This is how we're going to work with it, being transparent, and they'll see the authenticity and the honesty. And I think it'll lend itself to respect of you as a teacher and teaching that too. There's another comment halfway through the semester, students reflect on their learning style for their final project. They can choose whatever form benefits. Oh, I like that. So again, it's very much I see a lot of ownership, giving students ownership of the curriculum and letting them take charge. I like that. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our next presenter because I know we can spend a lot of time on this.
All right, folks. Our next one, our next set of slides is actually, we're going to have May come in to do this. And it's pretty data heavy. So I just want to get y'all ready. Okay, May.
Not to scare everyone, right? I'm a qualitative anthropologist, so quantitative's not my thing, so don't worry. But I wanted to go back to the comment about just kind of meaningful assessment. And I think the title of our session is Meaningful Assessment of Classroom Practices. So I think in the discussion we had, we kind of broadened that out a little bit, and we actually included kind of student outcomes. But I think I want to bring us back to thinking about meaningful assessment of classroom practices. So that means the information that we or I get as a faculty, whatever I get from this assessment, I'm going to use this to actually tweak my class or tweak the next time I teach this class. So I think thinking in terms of that framework might be useful in how we design what the outcome is. What is the information that I want to get from my students as a faculty member so that I can, in the next week or in the next 3 weeks or the next quarter, actually do something differently in a way that is more effective in the teaching. So in this section, we're going to turn to data, and I'm guessing, most of your colleges, your institutions have equity data. We have that. And sometimes it's used at this very kind of, bird-eye level. But what we want to do in this session in turning to data is to kind of draw the linkage between classroom practice and our own assessments of meaningful assessments of our own classroom practices and tie that to how maybe data points might be a good frame of reference for that. So we can go on to the next slide. So what I'll do here is give you a sense of how we at De Anza, and particularly the SLO core team that we are a part of here, the group that's presenting, how we kind of approach data and how we're encouraging our college to think about and our colleagues to think about data in terms of meaningful assessment and effectiveness in the classroom. So at De Anza, our stated goal is for closing the equity gap is our hope is that there's not more than 5 percentage points between the baseline and any student group that we've identified. And we focus on various kind of categories by race, ethnicity, which is what we're going to focus on here in this session. And so it's important to note that this equity goal is part of our student equity plan. It's written down, and it's also meant at the institutional level. It's not meant at the faculty level. So we're not asking every single faculty to hit a certain number. It's as a college and all of our data rolled up together. And our institutional research office makes available a number of data dashboards, and that may be the case at your institution. So we can play with these dashboards individually as faculty, and we can see the rates for course success and retention at different levels. We can see it for the college as a whole. We can see it by division. We can drill down by department, and we can drill down by course, and we can even drill down by sections. So I could try to even look for the section that I teach, or the course and the multiple sections that we offer for that course. And I think it's important to note that the intention of providing the data is so that faculty have a reference point for thinking about what they are doing and what they might be able to try out in the classroom that might actually affect the data. So I think it's fairly experimental in what we're asking faculty to do. If you know this data and you're also reflecting upon what you're doing in the classroom and you're trying to create meaningful assessments, how do you kind of put that together in a way that they're informing each other? And so it's important to also underscore that the data at De Anza is not intended or used by the college as an evaluative tool of teaching practices or an evaluative tool of individual faculty. So it's really meant to prompt conversation among faculty by department or by division. And what we're going to do in this session, we're going to look at some data dashboards that we at De Anza have available, and hopefully it prompts questions and thoughts for you, which we'll get into on the next Jamboard, which is precisely the point of introducing this data. So let's look at some examples of data. So this one here, we see course success rates and withdrawal rates by section. And we can see the range of course success rates by section. And we can see it goes from 30%, this is for one class, one course of multiple sections. We can see the enrollment count for that course per class or per section, and we can see the range of success rates from 30% on the low end to 90% on the high end. So if we were to look at this data, we don't know what's behind the numbers. We just see this static set of numbers. So the data would seem to be a good spark for conversation within a department or among the faculty who are all teaching different sections of this class. Why does one class or one section have a 30% success rate and another has a 90% success rate? So I think it's worth, at least talking about. So next slide, I'm gonna look at a next set of another dashboard. So here are course success rates and withdrawal rates by ethnicity and race. And we see the range of course success rates by group, with 47.9 for African-American students. We have 49.3% for Latinx. We have 57.1 for Pacific Islanders. And we can see also on the other end, 68.4% for Filipinx and 100% for Native American students. And we can certainly see gaps of more than 5% between the overall course success rate and for a number of the student groups. We can also see the enrollment numbers. So that helps us make sense of, Native Americans at 100%, well, there are 4 students. So again, we see the numbers, they're static, we don't know what's behind them, and we can try to find ways to explain it. And that, of course, would, beg a conversation among faculty who teach this course.
May I briefly jump in and just going back to that slide you just looked at. So do these success rates for the ethnic groups represent the aggregate of all of the sections, right? It's not, this one is not broken out per individual section like the other one was. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So
just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a good point. Okay, and then this last slide on data here, we can see aggregate data again for targeted student groups and the overall course success rate for the college. And we can see the percentage point of the equity gap for the student groups and what it means to close the gap in absolute numbers. That far right column there, additional needed successes, those are the number of students needing to pass or courses to be passed by students individually in order for us to actually close the gap. The percentage points there, I think for African American students, it's 11%, for Latinx, it's 9%, for Pacific Islander students, it's 11% as well. Okay, and so just to close up, some of you may have easy access to comparable data at your college. Some of you may not. Seeing the data probably sparks a number of questions for you all, which is precisely the purpose of offering and thinking about these data points as a reference point for meaningful assessment. So what we're going to do now, Veronica is going to lead us into hearing what your questions are now that we've kind of talked about data.
All right, I'm going to put the link in chat again. But if folks still have the same Jamboard open, you can just click the next arrow and it is the next board. All right, so you can get started on there. And then as I'm queuing this, we do have a question, May, for you from Katie. Katie's asking, was there any pushback to releasing section level data? And if so, what was that conversation like? Oh, maybe we could just do like a real quick answer to that.
If anyone else wants to chime, I haven't heard any particular feedback. And what's interesting, I went to look at the data dashboard yesterday, and I was trying to look for my section. And so I went to a specific academic quarter, I looked for my course number, I looked for my section number, and I couldn't find my section number. There were other numbers on the dashboard, but not mine. And so something's not quite right here. I think we actually have assigned section numbers, but they don't correlate to the one that you know that you taught. So it's somewhat anonymous. So from the outside, people can't quite see who taught what section. But for you individually, you can go into the dashboard, and if you know what your student enrollment number was, you can probably pretty guess which one is yours. So there's a layer of kind of anonymity there that I think perhaps mitigates some of the discomfort people might have for people being able to identify who taught what section and what the equity, the gaps are. And again, also, I think the approach that we have at De Anza is we're not trying to use the equity data to say you're doing good and you're doing badly, and we need to get you up to this, and learn from this faculty member. It's really about, okay, that's why we're not evaluating individual faculty or courses by that, but we're trying to move the college and move the data for the college. So I think in that spirit, our conversations are more facilitated with that intention in mind.
All right, I'm going to let Veronica set us up. I see your question, Penny, in chat, but let me let Veronica set us up first so folks can get started on the Jamboard. Then I'll go to your question, Penny. Go ahead, Veronica.
And I also realize aren't we a little over time right now? How's our time, or no?
I think we end at 12:30.
Oh, we end at 12:30. Good. Okay. So questions here, and I see you're already jumping in. What questions? Thank you, May, for that solid explanation of data. And I particularly like May's emphasis on the data is not meant to be used against us. It is meant to have a meaningful conversation, a robust conversation. So questions here, please go ahead and chime in. What questions come up when you see these equity gaps? What questions come up for you? What do you think? Do any questions come up for your students? What is your role in setting the stage for how a student perceives, feels, and learns in your class after seeing your own gaps? And how might that be different for different students? So go ahead and I'll give you time to put your thoughts down. And if anyone, again, has any more detailed information they want to share, comments they want to share, you can do that in the chat, or you can just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll be on the lookout for that as well. So, so someone is saying student focus groups, and there's a question mark behind that. So I'm not sure if they're suggesting that that's what we should be doing, more student focus groups, or doing student focus groups within our classroom. And I don't know if that person wants to elaborate, but feel free to elaborate if I'm missing the mark here. Another comment, haven't looked closely at my data. We are looking at, if we are looking at section by section, I would imagine I would require a good relationship between the deans, leaders of the collective bargaining union. If your school has a union, of course, the goal would be closing the equity gap, but it shouldn't be used as a tool for administrators to produce poor evaluations of instructors. Exactly. Thank you for whoever wrote that comment. And that was very much in line with what May was emphasizing in her conversation with everyone. Has anyone studied factors that contribute to the non-success rates? That's an excellent question. I don't know if any one of us want to take that question on, but what contributes to non-success? Or if anyone of our participants wants to address that question. Where I have equity gaps, perhaps I also have gaps in how I relate to and perceive content and how students do. It points to how I can rethink my content. Yeah, I looked at my own data, and I was surprised. I in some cases I'm doing a decent job, in some cases I'm not, and that was kind of hard for me to think about and learn too. So I have to come to some reckoning on, oh, what am I doing wrong? I thought I did everything so well. And just realizing that that's not always the case, but again, moving forward from there and having that reckoning of self so that I can improve. Overwhelmingly, when we shared this data, our faculty just really wanted to know what to do about it. The questions are about how to act on this strategically. I see, May, you want to chime in? I see you agreeing with that comment.
Yeah, no, I think that's where we are at De Anza too. You know, there a lot of this data is presented in kind of college-wide meetings of all sorts, but there's somewhat of a disconnect, I think, between those kind of presentations of the data and then as individual faculty, what do we do with it? So I think what we're trying to encourage with this session is to think about, okay, one, we want to kind of think about creating meaningful assessments of classroom practices, and then we also want this reference point of data. So it's kind of, I think, for us to figure out what it is. And, you know, as a faculty member myself, I don't get too attached to the data because I play around with my courses from quarter to quarter. So one quarter I could have terrible data, and the next quarter I have great data, and the next quarter I have terrible data again, because the way I change my rubric. You know, I'm noticing this of late, like and I'm teaching 3 classes right now. Each of my 3 classes have different rubrics, even for similar assignments, wondering why I did that. I can't tell you for sure, but it ends up resulting in different course success rates, or affects that. So I think it's, the idea here is that teaching is this iterative process, and it doesn't mean it's linear, that it's iterative in the sense that you get better and better and better. Hopefully you do, but you're experimenting all the time. And so I think how I think about the data as a reference point is, oh, I'm just seeing, what are some of the levers that actually affect it? And are those the levers that I actually want to kind of tap onto?
Thanks, May. I wanted to make sure we got to Penny's question. I think you responded in chat, right? Penny in chat asked, at a small college, there may be only 1 to 2 sections of a course in the semester. So was your data from one semester or multiple, and what data tool are you using? Right, and May's answer is in chat. All right, we also have a question from Kara. Do faculty have access to Tableau course level SLO data? How do you manage privacy so that faculty could see course level SLO data only for their own section? Is this a question for Lisa, May? Yeah, Lisa, if you're here, Lisa Lee.
Hi, I'm actually not too familiar with De Anza's Tableau tool yet. I just started at the college just this month. But I can speak to our inquiry tool. Our inquiry tool is built in-house by our ETS department. Everyone can access it via our My Portal. So it's not public facing out tool. I do know that when the inquiry tool was built, the section level data was only accessible to the faculty that was teaching it, right? May, based on what you just recently shared, it sounds like now all the sections are available for faculty to see. But again, in terms of faculty names or identifier attached to the section, going into the inquiry tool, you wouldn't know who taught that section unless you knew the term, the exact CRN that belonged to your section.
Thank you, Lisa. I think Mary, I see your hand up. I think you want to add. Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I heard on that particular one, the student learning outcome assessment data, and that we do make public the summaries, but there are no names attached to it when we make it public. Because I heard assessment data summaries and how we make that attached. And my experience with our inquiry tool, which is the one that May was addressing, is that you do not see other people's sections. There is a little, there's a little glitch to it when you go in to try and get one section and then you come back out to do all sections again. And it kind of doesn't work quite as smoothly. The first time you go in, if you go and choose a set of courses and you choose your section, you will see just your section and nobody else's. And then after that, as I say, it just doesn't quite give you what you think you're looking for. So yeah, but it does, it's safe as far as nobody else sees your course and you don't see all courses.
Thank you, Mary. We only have a couple minutes left. I wanted to give an opportunity for Veronica to share one final thought before I transition to Karen to wrap us up. So Veronica, any last thoughts on this board before we transition?
The last two, I hope I read everyone's, but one is understanding the developmental cultural, contextual, historical diversity of learners is central to understanding how people learn. We as educators we all realize and recognize this, and it's related to the next sticky note, which says equity gaps are a result of systemic racism. If we don't have this conversation, there will be no movement. Thank you for whoever wrote the systemic racism, both former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden, not to get political, but they are, I think they are some of the first. I don't think President Obama did it in his term to say systemic racism exists. So thank you for definitely, that is a needed conversation, and thank you for saying that in here to us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
All right, so Karen's going to wrap us up with some last thoughts.
Yes, so I hope that everybody feels inspired and has a lot of thoughts on their minds as a result of all this information that we've presented. I want to give props to my co-presenters for doing such a great job. And I think we'll just go straight to opening up for questions, especially about challenges and resource needs that we might have in order to do this work of assessment as deeply and meaningfully as possible. You want to make sure we have some time for some discussion.
Yeah, as people are thinking about the resources and the challenges that you might have at your institution, right? Karen, do you want to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about some of our challenges and resources?
Yes, well, certainly, I think the first one is that as faculty, as instructors, right, we're so busy teaching, right, and taking care of our students' needs, that this work of looking at data, reflecting, time-wise, right? It can be a challenge to create the time and space for how to do this work. Also, I think, what's been implied, I think, in the questions that people have brought up is, especially in a very small department, right? Or a very small college where there is one, or maybe two sections of a course, doesn't take a lot of sleuthing to figure out, what those numbers mean and whose classes, are giving those numbers. So trying to establish some foundation of trust and safe space, to talk about how we can improve, I think, is something definitely to work on and think about. How do we create an environment where we are trying to talk about the challenges, and we're also talking about spaces where we have a lot more accountability and responsibility in, say, setting up an environment, and how that might have something to do with the numbers and the data that we see. And also, I think, like May said, to not get too caught up in the data as well, to try to, in general, make it more about how can we best serve our students, maybe take it back to a level of engagement and dialogue at that level.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Karen. So unfortunately, we're out of time. We will be sharing the information on the Jamboard to you. I believe Veronica mentioned earlier, right, that you'll be gathering all the information and sending that out. I just want to take a minute to say thank you to all the participants. We usually have plenty of time, but you all participated so much in the Jamboards, and there was so much, good stuff that came in the Jamboards that we actually ran out of time. But please feel free to reach out to us as well if you have any further questions. Veronica, are there any last things to conclude with?
I just want to echo what you said. I think we try to make this a very engaging and participatory workshop, as you can see, a breakout session, and you give us ideas. And so I want to thank you for your participation. I want to thank you for your ideas. I'm going to put it together in a Word document so we can send that out. I'll talk to Mary and the leaders of the symposium so we can get that out to you.
All right, and thank you also to my fellow co-presenters. It was a pleasure for us to share this information with you, and hopefully we got some good discussion going for you. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon at this conference.